Hi folks, at least a couple of people liked the video where I asked about considering buying a refurbished X270 and then upgrading it. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I'm going to do it for a couple of reasons. One is obviously somebody that would like to get an X270 and upgrade it will find it useful. But to be honest, there's quite a few other machines of similar vintage, if you will, that would also be fairly upgradable. So some of the things I take into consideration, some of the choices I make and so forth would be translatable to other machines. So I'm going to do this more as a benefit to basically anybody that's thinking about upgrading their machine. Now the first step, and the video that we're making today, is going to be my thought process on choosing the correct X270 to go for. Now I'm going to wind up going to eBay, but let me sort of show you why I'm going to go to eBay. If you look for X270 and narrow it down to shopping, what you're going to find is that there are still new X270s being sold, even though the X280, the successor machine, has been out for a while. And even the refurbished X270s tend to be fairly high priced, at least if you buy them from a normal retail store. So B&H Photo has X270s used for about $630. You know, Lenovo itself has X270s. I imagine they would be new or lightly used, I guess I would say, but around 800 bucks. And then Walmart is selling X270s. I suspect they're brand new for $970. That's a lot more than I'm looking to pay. And, you know, I did search around, and the only ones that I saw that were of any interest were the ones that were already on eBay. Sometimes, particularly when you're looking for Lenovo machines, if there's a glut on the market because a whole bunch of them have just come out of lease arrangements with large corporations, you might find good deals at some of these normal retail shops. But, you know, right now there are some to be had, but not a whole lot, I guess I would say. So I think eBay is our best bet. Now, so I searched for X270, and then I sorted it price plus shipping lowest first. Now, in terms of, let me turn my audio off. In terms of, you know, the ones that pop up first, one thing you have to do before you decide that you're going to buy a refurbished, or in some cases a used machine, I'll consider both, but that's because I can sort of get an idea for how hard it's been used by looking at it. For you guys, I would stick more with refurbished, either manufacturer refurbished or third-party refurbished. There's a lot of companies out there that make a business of buying up these used machines at the end of their initial life and redoing them. And as I've said before, Lenovo are really good machines. Now, if you have enough knowledge of the machine that you're looking to upgrade, you need to take into account sort of what is upgradable and what is not upgradable. On just about every laptop you can think about, upgrading the CPU, the central processing unit or computer processing unit, is not going to be possible. And so, you know, one of the things I know about the X270 is they sold them for several years, and across the span of that years, they sold it with both 6th generation and 7th generation Intel chips in it, both i5s and i7s. Now, obviously, an i7 chip, or excuse me, a 7th generation chip is going to be a little bit faster than a 6th generation. But surprisingly, not all that much faster. Most of the advancements between the 5th, 6th, and 7th generations mostly dealt with battery life, and so they didn't really get faster that much. Maybe they went up like a tenth of a megahertz or something, but to be quite honest, it wasn't so much about getting that much faster. It was about getting a little bit more power efficient. So one of the nice things about these X270s, which I mentioned in the first video in this series, is that they have two batteries in them. They have an internal non-removable, well, you can replace it, but it's meant to be non-removable. And then they have an external battery that basically has two little latches. You pull those latches, you slide the battery out, and since the internal battery supposedly can keep it powered, you can even do this while the thing's running. Then you slide another battery in. And in addition to having that external replaceable battery, you can also replace it with larger batteries. There's batteries that sort of jut downward and make a little bit of a sort of support for the back of the computer. It tilts a little bit towards you, but some of those batteries can last much more than 12 hours. So I'm not so concerned about getting a 7th generation, you know, chip versus an i5 or a 6th generation chip. I'm also not, to be honest, that really concerned about an i5 versus an i7. Yes, the i7s are going to be a little bit faster, but with 6th generation, that's the only difference. I think we're going to find that most of these 6th generation i5 versus i7s had the same number of cores, the same number of threads, and the only difference was that the i7 was a little bit faster. Obviously, faster is better, and if I had, if everything else held equal, I would go with an i7 versus an i5. Now, the one reason that we might want to look at a 7th generation machine, though, is that I believe that with the 7th generation low power consumption laptop type chips, they might have gone to 4 cores and 8 threads on the i7. So we might wind up getting sort of twice as many processing cores. And let's just skim around, even though we've sorted it this way. What we'll do is let's go ahead and take a look at the specifications on the i7, the i7 machines that we see for the 7th generation. So even though you specify that you want to see Intel Core i7 6th Gen, that isn't all it shows you, of course. But here, we've got this i7 6600U. So really quickly, let's take a look at the specs on the i7 6600U. And there's quite a few places online that will give you information on it. What I usually look at is something like the CPU user benchmark. And what we'll do, since we've already got an i5 up here, let's compare that to which chip is in this one. This is going to be a this is also a 7th generation chip. So an i5 7300U. So let's do and what will happen is some of these comparison sites will come up and they will basically tell you the details on the two. So I was wrong, at least in terms of the i7. Oh, no, sorry. That's a 6th gen, right? And this is a 7th gen. So what happened with the 7th gen is Intel did start to give you a little bit more bang per buck. So let's go back and look. Sorry, I don't mean to meander here, but let's look for some 5th or 6th gen i5s, I mean. So i5 6200U, you know what, let's just get rid of this because it's not helping us that much. They've got things mistyped so much. So i5 6200, i5 6300. So let's see what the let's look for that chip. Okay, that also had 2 cores and 4 threads. I'm looking to see if there is a 6th gen i7 in here someplace. Now, to be honest, in this class of machine, most of them were i5. There's one, i7 6600U. Right, i7 6600U. So let's do that. Yep, so really, looks like there wasn't a heck of a lot of difference except for core speed, right? So in the 6th gen, the main difference between the i5s and the i7s that we're seeing is a little bit higher megahertz on the i7 than you get on the i5. And let's go back and look at some of those 7th gen machines that we saw. That first one we were looking at, it said i5 6200U. What is this one? So, processor. That's a 6th gen. 6th gen, 6th gen, 6th gen. So i5 7th gen, and I'm not seeing any i7 6th gen, 7th gen. Okay, so let's do this. There we go, i5 7300U. And i3. Oh, yeah, we don't want that. Okay, so the question is i5 7300 versus the i5 6300. So let's we're not going to see HQ parts in this. So really, it looks like the 7th gen i5 is actually probably pretty close to the 6th gen i7, right? So one last comparison here. Nice thing about this site is as you type, it actually gives you hints, and I think the most prevalent one we saw was the 6600U. So let's compare the 6th gen i7 with the 5th gen i5. Yep, so those two were very, very similar. Looks like the 7th gen i5 was slightly faster, but basically it's neck and neck. So long story short, if we get a 6th gen i5, it's about 0.2 of a megahertz slower, and if we get a 7th gen i5 or 6th gen i7, which seems to be what's possible, they're just a little bit faster. So let's do this. Let's go back in. Let's start with our sorting on price. Now, except for the processor, on this particular laptop, everything that we might want to upgrade is upgradable. The RAM is upgradable, the SSD is upgradable, the battery is replaceable, and so forth. So even though it seems sort of counterintuitive, once you've sort of settled on the things that can't be upgraded, and we basically have figured out that there's not a heck of a lot of difference in the processors. So if I can get a steal on a 6th gen i5, it's not going to hurt me that much in terms of speed. But once you've settled that question, then what you really want to look for is actually the cheapest, if you will, laptop. And in particular, you don't want to pay for things like SSDs or memory, because to be honest, we're going to upgrade the SSDs or memory past the ones that have more advanced configurations. So I'm looking for things that have a hard drive rather than an SSD. I think that 8 gig is probably the lower level. I don't want to pay for 16 gig, and I don't want to pay for SSD if I don't have to. Now this i5 6200U, that seems even a little bit slower than the 6300U, which was 2.4, but again, it's not that much slower. Now here's the deal though. This seems like a really good deal, right? And if we click on this guy, he's got pretty good ratings, 99.4 positive feedback, you know, that's great. But he's also fairly honest, so let's look and see. Yep, there's what I was afraid of. Minor scratches, scuffs, minor dings don't bother me, but a small nick in the screen does bother me. Small nicks in the screen can turn into large cracks in the screen fairly easily. And even though you can, if you have enough technical capability, upgrade the screens on these machines, I don't want to. Now, the only other reason, and let me just go back to the listing, the only other reason that I might think about getting a machine that has a 7th gen over a 6th gen is the default screen on these Lenovo laptops tends to be, here they've got the resolution, 1366 by 768. However, some of the higher end configurations that came out with, in my memory, the 7th generation chips came with 1920 by, where was it? It's up here, 1920 by 1080 resolution. Now, to be quite honest, I've never had a Lenovo with 1920 by 1080. All of my old Lenovo machines have had the 1366 by 768. I've been perfectly happy with it. Remember, we're talking about a 12.5-inch screen here. So really, the eye is going to have a hard time seeing much difference between those two resolutions. And from what I found in the past, the default sort of dots per inch and everything, and the default fonts that you get with a 1920 times 1080 screen in a machine this small actually might be too small, and you might have to blow the icons and everything up. But again, everything else held constant. If I could find a 1920 times 1080 screen that is just as cheap as a 1366 by 768, I'd go for it. But it looks like we're not going to, right? The cheapest one is almost $700, and that's more than I'm looking to pay. I'm looking to pay somewhere in the high 3s to low 4s range on this. So I'm going to uncheck that box. But we'll watch for it, right? Because sometimes, as we've seen, people that do these listings, they're wrong about what they put in the title, or there's a disagreement between the title and what's in the body. So we've ruled this first one out because it had a nicked screen. Now, this one right here is not refurbished, and it's from Morocco, and I don't want to wait on getting one from Morocco. I might be willing to go with a used machine, but let's see if there's any details. It has an NVMe hard drive in it, and let's see, the screen is 1366 by 768. It's a 6th gen i5. There's nothing really special about this. I think we can probably get a machine shipped here from the US that's probably going to be about the same range. So it looks like this guy, right, since I'm sorting on price plus shipping as lowest, looks like this guy sort of paid to get it featured prominently. So let's go on down the list. Now, I think, I'm not sure why this is not showing up with the same, I think this looks like the same listing. Matter of fact, so let's look at it. Let's read the details. See, this is the same listing. There's a small nick in the screen, and I think it's the same guy, to be honest. Let's check and see. Yep, it was the same sort of tech store that's reselling these things. So we can skip over that one. There's another sponsored listing that got pushed up, and it's got 16 gig of RAM and an SSD, but it's still the old i5 6300. It ain't worth $640 to me. So let's go down to the next listing, right? So we'll go a little bit higher cost. Now this does have the 6300U instead of the 6200U i5, so it's not as fast as the 7th gen, but it's a little bit faster than that sort of bottom tier i5 up there. Has 8 gig of RAM. It has an SSD, but it's not priced too much. Now be careful, it does have some shipping, so the total end cost is going to be close to $400. But I'm willing to pay that. I'm going to upgrade this SSD. I'm going to upgrade that RAM. So let's look and see, because it looks like the way it's listed that this is that same. Nope, probably not the same company. So let's look at the information. So charger is not included. Now I have enough Lenovo chargers laying around, and from my research I know that this X270 is chargeable via USB-C. It won't be as fast as the dedicated chargers, so I'm not too worried about the charger, and that might actually be a benefit for me. Maybe it's so cheap because the guy doesn't have a charger to sell it with. Now they say excellent working in cosmetic condition. What's this guy like? A lot of ratings and 100% positive feedback, so that might not be too bad. So this right here, and to be honest, a lot of times they put these listings up and they have a bunch of them, right? So you couldn't go by the pictures anyways. Let's see if there's anything that throws us off. Okay, so it's got a 30-day warranty from the guy. That's good. Now it is an auction, but I'm sort of ignoring the auction prices. I'm going with the buy it now. That's not I'm going to go ahead and add that to my watch list. That's not a bad price. That's probably, you know, $400 all in. I can go for that as long as it's in decent shape. Let's see if there's any. Nope, no more information about it. So we'll definitely keep that. Now what I want to see is there a machine around the same tier for about the same price? So this is what we're looking for. That was an i5 6300 at 2.4. Now this says it's an i5 at 2.6. It doesn't say what type of i5, but we saw before that's probably a 7th generation i5. So let's now again, it's got a SSD. I don't want to pay for that, but the price, when you consider that this guy's charging shipping and this guy isn't, the price is the same. So let's take a look at it and see. Good condition as shown. So what is the condition? Yep, i5 7th gen. Yep, it's got one stick of 8 gig of RAM. That's it's got a 1366 by 768. Like I said, I'm not too concerned about that. The other thing is you've got to watch these battery run times and everything a little bit tongue-in-cheek, just because you're buying a machine that's 3 or 4 years old. Batteries had some use on it. But again, because these batteries are replaceable, I'm not really concerned about that either. So, okay, so this is a, you know, assuming that they're telling the truth here, they're a Microsoft registered refurbisher. So I think between the two machines, this is a better one. It gives us a slightly newer i5, and everything else is the same. Now, you know, these are probably just representative screenshots and everything. Certainly doesn't seem to be any damage. So right now I'm leaning towards that one. Now, it doesn't mean that I can't be tempted to go higher. I'm not going to bother looking at this one because it says 2.4, and as we saw before, that's going to be a 6th gen versus a 7th gen, 6th gen versus 7th gen, 6th gen versus 7th gen, 6th gen, 6th gen, 6th gen. So there's a lot of 6th gens in here, right? I'm looking at the 2.4. The next closest one is this guy right here, which is 450. And unless this has a higher resolution screen or something like that, and I don't see any mention of it whatsoever. Let's see. Yep, 1366 by 768. So, sorry for the boring rendition. Let's see. Looks like... Okay, so this guy's going to make me rethink. Maybe. So let's look at this one. Now, this is not refurbished, so you got to be a little bit careful. But this looks like the next sort of tier up is about 460. So let's take a look at it. This is a 6th gen i7, so it's not really any faster than a sort of sorry, I think I said that right. Yeah, it's a 7th gen, sorry, 6th gen i7, so it's about a 7th gen i5, which I think is what we were looking at up above. Yeah, and it's used. So how many? Yeah, good positive ratings, but again, it's used. And though it's tempted to move up to an i7, we saw that we don't really get much improvement over the i5. It's just a couple of tenths of a megahertz. So I'm going to slide all the way back down to this guy that was selling it for right about 400. And we decided that that was, right, just to double check again, that that was a... Whoa, this ain't the guy. That's saying i5 6300. That's not the speed we were looking at. Sorry. Clicked on the wrong one. I meant to click on this one. So, yep. So I like this one. 7th gen i5, 256 gig. And I'm okay with everything else. So we're going to pay $400 for this. I'm going to go ahead and buy it now. Now, no, and I'm not going to buy the protection plan. I will go ahead and end the video here. The next video that I'm going to produce is basically going to go into Amazon and look at the parts we need to upgrade this. So what we'll be looking for is an SSD. We'll be looking for a hard drive, and we'll be looking for RAM. Thanks a lot. Take care.